In 2020, Space Force, a 4-star general begrudgingly teams up with an eccentric scientist to get the U.S. military's newest agency, Space Force, ready for liftoff. Created by Steve Carell and Greg Daniels, and starring Steve Carell, John Malkovich, and Ben Schwartz. Welcome to the American Recut. I'm Nick.
I'm Brendan.
Let's go ahead and talk about Space Force. Steve Carell's 2020 vehicle for Netflix. As always, we'll be doing first a spoiler-free overview of the series, our thoughts on a couple elements, and our light recommendations before we get into spoiler territory. With this series, let's just get into it. Start with characters.
Oh god, there's a hodgepodge of them. I mean, the series does center around two main characters, but there's just a whole bunch of other background characters that are whatever.
This series does have a relatively wide cast of characters. There is General Mark Naird, the main character, played by Steve Carell. Not great. And his wife, Maggie Naird, who doesn't get much screen time, and Erin Naird, his daughter. Additionally, there is the character Duncan, there is the 1-star General Brad, Tony, and the other arguable protagonist, which would be Dr. Mallory, played by John Malkovich.
Tremendous character.
I wouldn't call him tremendous, but I call him watchable.
I say tremendous because, in contrast to all the other cast members in this series.
I think that as far as the overview on characters, the characters in this aren't generally good. A lot of them are either one note or just really unpleasant in their interactions on screen in general. Character motivations are also very flimsy. They change from episode to episode. Sometimes characters practically get fully rewritten for the sake of an episode.
No, it's really inconsistent, which is frustrating.
John Malkovich gets points for being pretty watchable and doing a good job staying in character, broadly speaking.
Yes.
But otherwise, the characters are very much a dud in this series.
Very much so. I didn't like a whole lot of them.
I only liked Dr. Mallory, and even then that was only in contrast to the other very weak characters.
If only then, yeah.
Some characters are notably bad, but we'll get into that one in the spoiler section. But just know that this is not a series like The Office with good characters. This is a series like Space Force with terrible characters. Let's get into effects.
Some, and even then, it's not special or anything. It's not.
I would say as far as the effects go, at least for me, I don't think there's that much CGI going on, but what few effects they do have are practical effects, and they look cheap.
Yes, I agree. That's a good way of describing that. Any visual effects they had was very cheap.
And in this case, I'm going to take the effects idea and run it beyond just visual effects, which I mean, there are some places where the gag is that the military is cheap, but this set was also pretty cheap. There's maybe 4 sets they use that aren't just blatantly warehouses. Those sets they recycle a ton. There are a few notable episodes that look particularly cheap. I would say episode 2 looks especially cheap if you're looking for examples of that early on. There are a couple of notable places where they use CGI, and the CG, you can tell they really throw all the CG at one particular episode, and every other episode kind of suffers from a lack of interesting visuals as a result.
It does. It just looks so corny that you can't help but kind of cringe at how cheap and corny it is.
You can argue that part of the joke of the show is that the Space Force has very low funding, but I would argue it's more likely that was a written-in excuse for how cheap their effects look because of how rushed the show feels, which we'll get into that later.
We'll get into that, yeah.
So speaking of, let's talk about themes very briefly, because I can't say that themes are present in this show by and large.
No, that is one of the problems with God, I don't even know what to call this. Not even a sitcom, really.
Not a sitcom, yeah. We'll get into that with the plot, though. But
yeah,
there's attempts at themes in places, but the show's so flimsy with its themes, and it constantly changes its opinion about things episode to episode, even scene to scene sometimes, that it's very hard to nail down if this show's trying to say anything.
Yes, yeah. even like some of the characters like 180 from one episode to the next. So
And because the characters are so poorly defined and it's hard to really get to know these characters, it's hard to know even what they believe and if what they're doing goes against their beliefs or if it just goes against the beliefs that they have today.
which hampers their development, which is such a shame.
I don't think it's a shame. The show doesn't have anything really going for it, but speaking of what it doesn't have going for it, let's talk about the plot, which I would call the worst part of the show by a mile.
Absolutely. It's awful.
Just about everything it does wrong. For some reason, the show is sequential instead of episodic, which means that it follows a consistent plotline throughout the entire season. Why you would do this, I don't know.
Why? It doesn't have to have a central overarching plot.
I would say the show's first and foremost failure is a coherent story, or really a broad genre tone. Because a lot of time when you're watching this, the show will flip between cringe humor, wacky humor, government humor, military humor, straight-laced philosophies, pseudo-intellectualism, political commentary, and fictitious depictions of real politicians.
They throw everything but the kitchen sink into that, yeah.
I think it's clear the show does not know what it wants to be. The character motivations change constantly. In particular, the two most noticeable ones are the main characters, in fact. General Naird and Dr. Mallory, who, in the first episode, they feel like they've got at least flaws. They're not funny flaws, but they're flaws. Like, you might notice in the first episode, General Naird's whole thing is that he's very straight-laced, he's very military, he kind of has a stick up his ass and won't do anything without it being the official protocol. And Mallory kind of has like this weird complex that like he's the one in charge somehow, and that he hired on the general. Like he's got this really weird like superiority complex. Both of those go away immediately.
It's kind of like Don Quixote, where you have this idiot general, but you have the scientist who's like this voice of reason that tries to talk him off the edge there.
Except it flip-flops over the series, and by the end it's like almost reversed. It gets really weird.
It does. It really does. That's so disappointing.
But beyond that, if you're looking for the big tagline for what this show does wrong, it's time management. I wouldn't say the show is rushed, because the show has the time to explore its plots, but divvies up its time incredibly poorly.
They just drag jokes out excruciatingly way too long.
It's very strange because with like plot elements or emotional notes, they rush past those every time. But with like jokes that don't work or duds, they will linger on these dud jokes for minutes in a show that feels rushed.
And it's insufferable.
It is very strange choice of pacing. I would say that, like, especially for someone like Steve Carell, who should know like how you make a snappy joke or write something to be snappy, it's baffling that he wasn't able to step in and say, this isn't working. We need to have a quicker cut or a smash cut.
Right. He's such a seasoned veteran in this particular field.
And if you're somebody that for a sequential show, sometimes it matters how it ends, it is an incredibly unsatisfying ending. Do not stick with the show if you're looking for the end for it to end on an interesting note or follow an interesting storyline. Don't trust the show with that. It is not good. We'll get to exactly why later, but just heed me when I say the show is incredibly poor in terms of its plot. So, with all that said, then.
Actually, I kind of want to talk about a new category as well, tones.
Yeah. What do you mean by tones?
Tones, I anticipated this going in to be a comedy, and it did make a very poor attempt at that, but it also tried to, toward the end of the series, it kind of touched up on some more serious stuff, and that confused me. Like, is this not a comedy? Is it trying to be like a movie? Like, what tone are you trying to set here?
Yeah, the tone of this flips really hard, because sometimes it's like a workplace comedy thing where you'll have just catty behavior back and forth between some of the characters.
Right, and that was the beauty of The Office.
Sometimes there's a military comedy where it's orders are funny because the military gives bad orders. It's a weirdly persistent political critique at times. It'll really try to dig in, take some cheap shots or build a bunch of strawmen to knock down. Right,
or even looking at individual episodes, they'll, like you said, linger on a joke for 5 goddamn minutes, but then have an attempt at some heart-to-heart moment for 2, and it's just totally unneeded. It totally derails the tone of the episode, and it's just confusing.
There's even some really odd, like, action movie, like, intrigue plot lines that happen near the end.
Yeah.
Which really clashes with the attempts at like Office Space comedic stuff that takes place at the same time.
Right, exactly.
The tone is all over the place on this show.
It really is. If you're going to make a movie or TV show, have the tone at least be consistent, and also, on a side note, have a good hook.
Yeah, the hook's very weak for this as well.
Incredibly so.
All right, well, let's get into the final recommendations and final words. Would you like to start?
So I did anticipate this series to be somewhat similar to The Office or like Scrubs in the sense that it was going to be more sitcom-y and zany and just funny. I got none of that. It was not funny. It was 10 episodes of disappointment. Each episode more excruciating than the last. I had a hard time motivating myself to push on through.
Yeah, likewise, I would not recommend it. The show feels like work to watch. It's thoroughly unpleasant to go back to. At its best, it's bland. At its worst, it's painfully pseudo-intellectual. It's very eager to pat itself on the back for its kind of bare minimum views that it offers. But in terms of review, stuff that we can talk about reviewing, it's unpleasant, and but by the end of it goes from being just unpleasant but watchable to thoroughly hateable. Absolutely not.
The only way I would enjoy it is if I was on Oxycontin, and even then that's a stretch.
Alright, well, let's get into the longer ramble and deeper dive into exactly what we didn't like about this. And there's going to be a good amount this time, I think.
Oh, yeah. And it's going to revolve some main themes, i.e. characters and plot, but yeah.
So I want to talk about time management, because that is the most important flaw of the show and the biggest way that it fails. Because there are a few places where the show does not have the right priorities for it to focus on at all. It does a horrible job with that.
It does. Well, and it's like we said in our texts back and forth. You said, thank God this is only like 30 minutes long, and that is a mercy, because some other Netflix series I know have a 50-minute runtime, which, dear God.
I noticed while I was watching it that episodes were vary in length. Some of them were like 37 minutes long, some were 27 minutes long, some were like 31 minutes long, and I was thinking, like, these scripts are barely edited. Because there's no appropriate length of time that they're trying to follow. They're just kind of doing what's off the top of their heads and running with it.
They're spitballing. Exactly, yeah.
My personal theory is that they wanted to rush this out as quickly as possible, get it out during the current administration, because there's a lot of cheap jokes against them. Like, a lot of, like, strawman jokes. Like, you don't need to build strawmen to be opposed to a president like this. There's much better fodder you can use than just what they use.
No, right. They want to capitalize on contemporary satire, and sure, yeah, go for it while the iron is hot, but like you said, if you rush it...
Which, you know what they say, pop culture references never age. But in terms of time management, not only is this episode per episode, but just full episodes, which if this is a sitcom-y type thing, or just episodic, fine. But since this is a sequential show, where every episode leads into the next, this is a problem when you have episodes that are a complete waste of time. The very second episode of the whole series, which is the one that deals with the... and just before anything else, spoilers. There are going to be spoilers in this section. We're going to get deep into spoiler talk. But second episode, that is the Space Chimp episode.
God.
Completely pointless.
Completely.
If you're somebody that is watching this thing, oh, okay, it's sequential, we'll have things that come back and repeating gags. No gag comes back from the early episode.
They never bring the chimp back.
They don't bring the chimp back at all. Like, they go through this whole thing of, like, the chimp gets captured. They threw their entire CGI budget at the chimp episode, and you can tell it's CGI. It's really odd.
Oh, yeah. It's painfully apparent that it's CGI. And no, they bring in all that effort for what?
For a filler episode that doesn't go anywhere. I think it establishes the Chinese as, like, the super technologically advanced enemy, but how are they technologically advanced?
I don't know.
We never see anything about India. We never see anything about China. I don't know why they're the two major enemies. There's also this. There's one character in this one I'll talk about for time wasting. Yuri. He comes with Bobby. Yuri is a complete waste of time and goes nowhere.
Totally. He's clearly a spy for Russia, And he also acts as a potential love interest for Steve Carell's main character's daughter, Erin.
Erin, she is the worst.
I hate her, yeah.
Yeah, so this show, I think the most prime example of real time wasting within an episode is there's the episode where they launch their astronauts into space to begin colonizing the moon. And the way the show goes, it spends about 30 seconds or so on the actual rocket launch. It's like maybe a quick 4-second shot of the rocket taking off, another 10 seconds of applause, and then we move on to the post-launch stuff, which is, no joke, 3 minutes of Steve Carell having awkward small talk with a woman that he wants to ask out to dinner. Awkward explaining, oh, I'm actually married, but it's an open wedding, so it's okay. She's like, oh, it's an open marriage. He says, yes, it's an open marriage. Wacky one-liner.
No, right, and you know what? Even worse, they bring in those awkward conversation jokes in like 4 different episodes.
It is bizarre because you want that to be snappy for the for the meet cute. You want this to be very quick. You can't linger on that one, or it doesn't work. You want to linger on the rocket launch a little bit if you're going to have these moments of like actual like philosophic interest and empathy with like the wonder of space, but they never do the legwork to get there.
No, right. It's called Space Force. Wouldn't you think it would centralize around, spacernauts?
It's very strange because like for the main plot beats and the very important stuff that happens, they'll just kind of jump ahead to the major plot events. You just kind of check them off like a checklist of like rising action, falling action, so on like that. But when they do the legwork for like Steve Carell's awkward emotional stuff and like being a dad, they'll just walk in circles for 5 minutes, getting nowhere, and then claim the legwork for the other half of the plot.
It's just excruciating. Because, like you said, it lingers. It contributes nothing to the overarching plot, which they're trying to develop, and it just throws off the character development or character arc. I can't even call it that. I don't even know what to call it.
Speaking of one that has particularly bad pacing, Captain Angela's whole plot line. Because her thing kind of starts with her saying, I want to be an astronaut, just out of nowhere, by the way, approaching one of the characters, Chan, to be studying microbiology, because she knows that the astronauts need to have a lot of studying and need to pass a lot of tests. So she starts the process. 2 episodes later, she's in the rocket. It's been maybe a week.
At best, yeah, she just hopped right onto that little shindig.
Maybe there's a joke there that, like, it's so rushed they even brought her on as the captain without any qualifications. But if there was a joke, they didn't tell the joke. Like, she just shows up as the new astronaut after saying she wants to be an astronaut, and then going at length to talk about, I have to study for it, I have to make sure I know all of my science and my physics and stuff like that. But then she just is an astronaut a few episodes later. They did none of the legwork to make it feel earned that she gets to step on the moon first.
Yeah, she was a helicopter pilot that was just casually introduced, and then she just, they just, for some reason, thought, let's make her a pivotal character.
Well, she is black and female. That means that's inspirational when she gets to walk on the moon first. This show does a lot of lip service to social causes without, again, doing the legwork or knowing why they're doing the legwork.
Right.
The other part of the show that I really want to talk about and just dig into for just how fun it is to talk about how bad it is the final episode. It is so bad.
So bad. Holy shit, it was bad. And that was 36 minutes long. That was a 36-minute long episode.
Okay, so I typed this up earlier, so I want to just read through kind of the general summary of the episode and why it's so bad.
Shoot.
So the episode starts with an escalation of tensions between American and Chinese moon bases, with the U.S. government calling for hostilities to commence. General Nair tries to undermine this to sabotaging his own weapons and forces, but he ultimately gets put under arrest and his operation seized. Now, along this plotline, and given more screen time and emotional weight, is the general's daughter going with some shady guys to a backwoods meth party, where she is completely ignored and free to make multiple phone calls, and eventually just ride a bike and leave. Now, luckily, the show knows where to put its time and effort, so the big climax is the general breaking free of his bonds, taking responsibility for everything around, and he steals a helicopter to save his daughter from 2 people on dirt bikes who aren't armed and don't seemingly pose a threat to her. Afterwards, the general picks up his wife, who broke out of prison off screen, the daughter called her as well, and gets a call that things are kind of funky with the astronauts. And then that's the end of the season.
Yeah, no, it's just left on a cliffhanger, and it's just so disappointing.
It's so bizarre. Like they put so much emotional weight on this plot line for
2 episodes? Yeah.
Which, why? Aaron's plotline is going nowhere. This is sitcom levels of misunderstandings.
I don't even like Aaron, nor do I care about her overarching character. A spoiled brat. She's constantly argumentative.
She is insanely rude to everyone she meets as a first reaction. Like, there is nothing likable about Aaron.
No.
Yeah, she's terrible.
Why you would bring that particular character trope into this series even at attempt at humor? It's just not funny.
But there is another painfully unfunny part of the final episodes, which is when Chan takes Captain Angela to get eye work done in town. We get a lot of scenes where it cuts back to them talking in the car, and Dr. Chan's whole thing is he's a nerd.
And she's not. Well, she kind of is.
Maybe, there's a few half jokes that clearly weren't fully written, where, okay, so there's a part where he's talking about, explaining, Full Metal Alchemist versus Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and how they're divergent series, and how one of them is a later reimagining of the first, and blah, 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 blah.
Right, Chan is weebing out.
But Captain Angela then has this really weird line where she kind of says, "Don't mansplain anime to me."
Right?
My first thought was, he's not mansplaining anime. He's explaining the specific anime and the nuance between the two of them.
Right.
He's not explaining the concept of anime. He's explaining this particular show that you seem to be confused about. Because she still doesn't get it afterwards either. So it wasn't mansplaining. She doesn't watch the show.
How do you mansplain I don't know.
Yeah, you would mansplain an anime more by saying, "So you know cartoons, right, Han? Well, over in Asia, they call them anime."
That's true. God.
You ever hear of... so that would be kind of more mansplaining. It's the idea they're not even familiar with the idea of animation. Assuming they're really stupid.
Yeah.
Not when you're talking about nuances of a specific show. And that's part of my other thing that annoys with this show, is that they often throw out a lot of social ideas and progressive arguments without understanding the progressive arguments.
No, right. It just, to me, it kind of feels like a slight pandering ploy or something.
I think it's just them not understanding how you frame an argument responsibly in a show. Because early on, there is a congressional hearing where you have 3 people on this panel. A Bible-thumping right-winger who is very pro-war, an old-hats politician, and an obvious stand-in for Alexandria Ortega-Cortez, who is a very aggressive intelligence senator who really pushes General Nerd hard on his opinions.
Yeah, she grills him.
Because of the way the show is paced and the way the show chooses to focus on things, there is a certain element of the right-winger flat-earther Republican who's pro-war, which makes it look like he's just kind of having these cute one-off lines because they never get addressed or deconstructed. But Alexandria Ortega-Cortez is framed almost like she's a villain of the show. She's given a full antagonist treatment, which, if you're trying to promote socially conscionable ideas and trying to make her look very respectable, don't frame her as an antagonist to be overcome.
I wouldn't even really call her an antagonist, or more like, I don't even want to say a voice of reason, but a voice of reason that stops the air quote protagonist from doing something incredibly stupid, That would be an antagonist. She's trying to get in the way of the protagonist. Well, and that's where Dr. Adrian Malloy, John Malkovich's character, is kind of an antagonistic voice too.
Not really, because he's one of the good ones for Nerd, because he'll always end up having his back and coming back with a smart idea.
Thank you for phrasing it like that. One of the good ones, right? The show does kind of take jabs at the current political establishment's distrust of science, but
they sneak it in where they can, but they do it with such a soft hand that... Yes. Well, anyways, they will build these very weak arguments to knock over so that they look smart, but you can't do that because that's bad faith argument, even if it's coming from someone that's progressive.
The thing so going back to Dr. Adrian Mallory, he was the only good/decent thing about the show. I mean, even he did 180 toward the end as well, but for the first 5-6 episodes, he was solid.
Because at first he's kind of this very science-based person who's constantly do the scientific method, trust our scientists, I'm bringing the best and brightest. But by the end, he kind of becomes a really petty, judgmental asshole who is just constantly having mirror arguments with a scientist that bothered him. He's advising for outright war on the moon because he was personally offended. He undermines the people that work, contractors that work with them, because he feels like he's being demeaned. He really becomes kind of a little shit by the end.
He does. He absolutely does. And it's just so baffling as to... it's so sad to see a good character transition into that. Why?
I think at the very least, Tony actually ends up being kind of fun because he's at least evil and, not even close to embarrassed about it.
I still don't like fucking Tony.
I like Tony because of the part where he has the other agent where he's, kind of trying to play it cool. He's I'm so jealous. I'm so fucking jealous. Holy shit.
Okay. I'll give you that.
They have the makeout scene, and it's okay, he's just reveling in being evil. I can appreciate that.
Right, it does kind of playfully depict both of them as backstabby, underhanded salesmen. Yeah.
If you're gonna have a character, have them be unabashedly evil like that. That's more fun in a sitcom type of show than what they do with speaking of characters who particularly flip flop when the plot needs them to. General Nerd, Steve Carell's character, is the worst for that by a mile.
He changes his tune every episode. First episode, he's straight-laced, but then the second episode, he's testosterone gun-ho. What the fuck?
But in the second episode, he's testosterone gun-ho, he's making the dumbest ideas and dumbest plans and ignores science. And at the end of the episode, he goes back home and helps his daughter with her math homework, and he knows all the formulas.
He knows trig. He's an idiot that is using a chimp to repair a rocket, yet he knows trig. Fuck you, show.
He knows all these concepts. He's good at math. Why is he good at math? Why is he good with his homework? Why is he suddenly a gentle, loving, caring father? He has scenes in the war room where he is the voice of reason, and he constantly is advocating for no, we can't escalate, we can't go that far, we can't do that. But he'll also have scenes where he's just fire a bomb at it, what are you waiting for?
I know, yeah, Mr. Trig, just his first option was a bomb. I mean, come on.
So odd the way that Carell's character will change, which tells me that they are absolutely just spitballing stuff and not really deciding on a character yet.
Right, and I also think there's no central writer. I think that what they're doing with this, what they did with the Umbrella Academy, where they had an idea, but then they just kept bringing in new writers for each episode or some shit.
I think there's probably a lead writer. I would imagine that Steve Carell is probably the creative head of this project. He is the creator, after all.
Okay, but why is the tone so widely inconsistent? It's just so bizarre.
Because he doesn't know why The Office worked. He knows it worked, and they try and recapture the plot beat sometimes, but he doesn't know why it works.
I think, no, it's like we were saying earlier. It feels like they're trying to recapture the early comedy sitcoms of, Scrubs, Office, Parks and Recreation, shit like that.
They do that, and they do this very odd other thing that I was noticing through the series that kept bothering me too, is that they do homages to a lot of different science fiction shows and a lot of different sci-fi stuff. When they're on the ship, there's some shots that are very obvious homages to 2001: A Space Odyssey. There are scenes in the Potato episode where there are obvious references to... The Martian. The Martian, thank you. Yeah, there's obvious shots that are homages to The Martian. There are obvious shots that are references to Doctor Strangelove, with the way that the office is designed and the way they shoot scenes at the round table. There are all these strange references, but they clearly don't understand any of those movies or why they work, because they cram these into a vaguely sitcom-y, vaguely sequential comedy slash political slash military slash action drama.
Yes, they puree so many different things together to the point where it's like blending all the McDonald's menu items together just to produce sludge that doesn't smell or taste good.
I think that the place where this kind of started tipping over for me and like getting me against the show was relatively early on when they're looking for an Indian spy, which turns out there's no spy. The Indians just made us the same rocket, which seems like a plot point, but.
Yeah, that's where it kind of died for me as well.
That is when you have Dr. Mallory singing his kind of spin-off of What a Wonderful World, but before his boyfriend, who never shows up again. That's weird. You repped a homosexual person, but you didn't actually have his boyfriend show up on screen. The thing with that is that if you spent maybe 10, 20 seconds on that one, it's a sweet homage. You get the tune, you get the idea of how it works, but they spend the full length of the song, like 2.5 minutes, just constantly rubbing in the same joke over and over and over. I'm embarrassed, please turn it off. No, leave it on. You have a nice voice. Thanks, I'm embarrassed. And then it goes back and forth, and it's like, it runs the joke into the ground, it stops feeling sweet, and it runs what you were trying to do with that joke because it ran too long. So, I think I've said all the pieces I have for this show. Do you want to add anything on?
I think my biggest grievance with this show overall is the characters. They are either one-note attempts that just disappear into the background, like Yuri or Brad. He floats. Every character's so one-note, one-sided. Even Erin just continues She never develops as a character. She just continually remains as an insufferable teenager.
Oh yeah, there was also that Edison woman that shows up for an episode and then leaves.
Thank you, that's right, I forgot. Yes, the female Elon Musk. And yeah, just none of the characters were decent outside of John Malkovich's character, Dr. Adrian Malloy. That's the thing, Dr. Adrian Mallory. But beyond that, the characters never gripped me, and that's for me, ultimate letdown for this series. I could forgive some plots, but I mean, if the characters don't make it work, then what's the point?
Yeah, and I think that's, if you don't mind my going into the final statements in general.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the problem with this show, is that nothing works with this show. The pacing is easily the worst part of it and the most noticeable thing, but characters are not consistent. They're not even likable in the first place. A lot of plot points for a sequential show get just dropped off the face of the earth and don't matter. The pacing is frantic to the point of it being kind of a fever dream at times, especially with the last episode. And it feels just so cheap. It feels so rushed. It feels very scatterbrained, like they weren't really thinking about like basic elements of writing a television show or filming a television show. There's a lot of really flash shots too that I didn't mention because it's competent, but it's not good. So I would say that this is arguably the worst Adam Sandler vehicle I've seen in a while. They didn't even go to Hawaii.
No, they didn't. No, that's actually a very good category for this particular kind of, I don't even want to call it a comedy, but show.
Yeah, I would say if this has to fall on a scale of badness, this is like really competing with Adam Sandler, which you don't want to be there.
No, you do not, and it's a shame that you kind of fell into that category.
At the very least, Adam Sandler will take his crew to Hawaii and like enjoy a nice couple months in Hawaii just filming.
Would I recommend this? Absolutely not. It's, even if you have a Netflix account, it's just avoid it. It's not worth your time. It's work to watch. I wouldn't recommend.
God, if it's between this and like, I think that there's a new Adam Sandler movie, The Other Mistress, or The Wrong Missus, something like that.
For some reason, when you say that, I want to watch that more than I would want to watch this.
That's the feeling I'm getting too, which is not good.
No, it's not. I'm sorry, Steve Carell. And, I liked Steve Carell. I like John Malkovich. But all the same, what the fuck happened there?
I'm noticing that there is kind of this weird, like, you know how Adam Sandler has his crew of people that are always in everything he does?
Yeah.
Steve Carell has that same kind of crew of people that are in everything that he does.
kind of noticed that. You know, I watched a few of his other shit earlier, and yeah.
They're all in the war room. I love you, Patrick Warburton. You've got the voice of an angel, but stop tagging along with these terrible Carell vehicles. I can't remember her name. She's in the war room. She's
The Navy Admiral. I forget her name.
yeah.
too.
I forget her name, but she's always the same kind of character, which is angry, vaguely insane woman.
Yeah. Or the Coast Guard, the guy that's always like, not now, dude. You know, you're always last in line, Coast Guard.
Yeah, he's also been in a lot of other stuff too. I don't remember his name at all, though.
Nor do I. I feel kind of bad about that. I've seen him in some other stuff, but for the life of me, I can't remember right now. I'm just so...
I guess we should talk about Noah Emmerich and General Kit Grabiston, but
Yeah.
he's still one down terrible. It doesn't matter.
I think, no. You know, I mean... I would like to remember more stuff right now, but I think this whole series just sapped whatever mental energy I have or motivation I have.
Yeah, we got off topic anyways. We said our final piece. No, God, no. Stay away from this garbage. So, since we both hated it, that means this will probably get another 8 seasons, and will probably be a huge hit with our respective parents. So look forward to that.
God, yeah, the only real target audience, boomers.
And this is like fake progressivism too, so it's perfect.
Yeah, right.
Alright. Well, thanks for joining us. May God have mercy on our souls.
Oh, God, please do not let there be a season 2.
Oh, there's going to be like 7 more seasons, and you know it. It's all going to be terrible.
Well, this has been Mournfully Brendan.
And I'm Nick.
Bye.
Bye.